Welcome, science friends, to Intro to Meiosis. There are a few things we need to know before we get into the process of meiosis. First, offspring of sexually reproducing organisms receive 50% of their genetic material from each parent. So that means offspring get half of their genetic information or DNA from dad and half their genetic information or DNA from mom. Well, if that's true, why are siblings different from each other? I don't look exactly like my sister. I'm sure unless you are an identical twin, you don't look exactly like your sibling if you have siblings either. There are different types of reproduction. One of them is asexual reproduction. This is reproduction that produces identical offspring. So most asexually reproducing organisms use mitosis. They produce cells with the same information, and they are exact copies. They have exact copies of the DNA. They are also considered clones. They have the same amount of DNA, the same number of chromosomes, and the same genetic information. The most famous asexually reproducing organisms are bacteria. So as we watch in this little GIF here, our bacteria are going through mitosis, where they're just making more and more copies of themselves exactly over and over and over again. They're making the same chromosomes, and they have the same genetic information through that mitosis process that we already learned earlier in the year. But what about the rest of us? More complex multicellular organisms, animals, plants, more complex things, how do they reproduce? Well, we need an egg and a sperm. We need to join those two gametes or sex cells. But do we make eggs and sperms by mitosis? No. If we did, then this is what it would look like. We would have 46 chromosomes with an egg, 46 chromosomes from the sperm, and that would equal 92 chromosomes for that zygote or the fertilized egg. Well, humans and most other organisms have a set number of chromosomes. Humans have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, and if all of those pairs were to go into a baby, that would be one messed up baby with 92 chromosomes. It can't work that way. So we have to remember the numbers of chromosomes. So let's take a look at this human female karyotype. There are 46 individual chromosomes, and there are 23 pairs. There are 2 number 7 chromosomes, there are 2 number 18 chromosomes, there are 2 sex chromosomes. So we have 2 or a pair of each of our chromosomes. So how many chromosomes do you inherit from each parent? Well, if you think about it, you have 2 parents and you have 2 of each chromosome. That means you get 1 chromosome from mom, 1 chromosome from dad. We have to remember that chromosomes are homologous. Again, that word means homo, same, logos, information. So homologous chromosomes have the same information on them. So each pair contains the same genes for the same traits. So for example, we have here our single-stranded homologous chromosomes, and we're going to duplicate them into double-stranded homologous chromosomes for this meiosis process and also for mitosis. Let's say there's the gene for eye color and height and freckles. Well, the other chromosome will also have those 3 traits in the same places. Because if we look at the karyotype, we see all of those bands, and those bands are indicative of certain traits. And if you notice, all of those pairs, those homologous pairs, have the same bands in the same locations, indicating that we have the same genes on those same homologous chromosomes. That brings us to our next vocab word, ploidy. Ploidy is the number of copies of a chromosome in a cell. Here are some different words for different ploidies. Haploid is 1 copy of each chromosome. So here we have 3 non-homologous chromosomes. They do not have the same information. They are different sizes. They have centromeres in different places. They likely have different genes. Next that we see diploid. Di means 2. So we have 2 copies of each of those chromosomes. We have 2 of the first one, 2 of the second one, 2 of the third one. They're all the same length, and all the pairs have centromeres in the same places. We can see that generally they are the same color. We have 2 that are green, 2 that are blue, and 2 that are this sort of pinkish purple color. But we're getting 1 from mom and 1 from dad. It says maternal and paternal. So with this in mind, what ploidy are cells produced by mitosis? Diploid. There are 2 of each of those chromosomes when we go through mitosis. It just makes exact copies. But that still doesn't answer our question on how do we make sperm and eggs. We have to reduce the number of chromosomes. We can't pass on all 46 of our chromosomes to our offspring. We need to only contribute half that number. So we need to reduce the number of chromosomes by half. So meiosis, we're going to take our 46 chromosomes that we have, and we're going to split them in half. So there's only one of each of those 23 chromosomes moving on to pass down to the next generation of offspring. Here's a really quick side-by-side as we start to learn more about meiosis. Mitosis, the one we learned about earlier in the year, is often used for asexual reproduction. Organisms like bacteria, most other cells that are not sex cells or gametes, they need to make exact copies of themselves. So they start with a diploid cell with all, if we're talking about humans, with all 46 chromosomes. And it's making an exact copy, so those identical cells that are made also have those 46 chromosomes. However, if we have sexually reproducing organisms like humans, other animals, and plants, we have to reduce the chromosome number by half. We don't want to pass down all 46 of our human chromosomes to our offspring. We need to cut it in half so that the partner, either the male or the female, those gametes can join to create the 46 chromosomes. So here we're going to start with a diploid cell, 2 of each chromosome, so 46 total, and we need to split it in half into 23, and then we'll see in the next video that those get separated from double-stranded, so the X's, into single-stranded, and so then we end up with 4 haploid, or 1 of each chromosome, in the sex cells, sperm and eggs. That was Intro to Meiosis. I hope it helped.